Strategic leadership, right? Very fascinating word. In fact, let's unbundle these two a little bit, right? Strategic and leadership. Now, strategy is a very, very, very interesting word, right? It has, the word itself has gravitas, meaning you attach this strategy to any word, it sounds very cool, isn't it? You can say sales strategy, marketing strategy, career strategy, pricing strategy, technology strategy, product strategy. You attach strategy to anything and it sounds very sophisticated, right? So what do we mean by strategy and what do we mean by being strategic, right? I think let me spend 30 seconds on that. Essentially, when you're talking about strategy in a business context, right, we are talking about three questions, fundamentally three questions. The first question is, where do we play, right? At the end of the day, every business is creating some offering to the market, whether it is a product, whether it is a service, whatever it is, you are taking it to the market. So in that context, this question is super important, that what playground do we choose to play our game, right? Because there are many playgrounds. Now, if I translate this into business speak, we call this as market segments, customer segments, and many of those things. But in a simple way to think about it is, where do we play? And the second important question is, how do we compete to win, right? So that's the second important question. And the third one is, what do we produce or what do we create in order to help those two above questions, right? So now if I put that in the context, often in a business environment, in a corporate environment, you usually have three layers of strategy, right? I call this as a strategy stack. The first level of strategy is corporate strategy, right? Often you will see CEO, board members, corporate strategy team. These are the people who actually formulate a corporate strategy and answering that very simple question as to where do we play, which playground do we choose? Currently we are playing here. There are lots of other players, which is competition, right? And is this the right playground for us? Do we choose another playground, whether it is geographically different, whether it is psychographically different, whatever it is, right? So that's usually defined at the corporate strategy level. And I'm talking about medium to large organizations, right? And we can talk about small startups, which is quite different. And then you have business strategy, right? And business strategy is often formulated by the heads of business units, right? Whether it is a general manager, head of engineering, head of products, head of marketing. This is the leadership team. This is the team that often defines and answers that second question that we talked about, which is, how are we going to compete and win on this playground that has been chosen by us, for us, right? And the third one is functional units, right? You may come from engineering, you may come from marketing, you may come from product management, you may come from design, sales, whatever it is. Now, in that functional unit, the third question that we talked about, what are we going to create? What are we going to produce to help us to either answer that question? Here is how we are going to compete in the playground that we have chosen, right? So keep that in mind in a very simplistic way. That is what is strategy is about. And somebody who develops ability to structurally understand both external environments, internal environments, and helps formulate the strategy is what we call a strategic acumen, right? Strategic thinking is also what is said. So that's the first part of that word. The second part of that unbundled phrase that we talked about is the leadership. Now, this is also fascinating, isn't it? Leadership is such an abused and misused word today that anything and everything gets lumped under that leadership part, right? So in this context, let me kind of bind the scope of what we mean by leadership. Now, many of you, I'm assuming, are managers, right? In your companies, you're managing people, you're managing projects or whatever. Now, management is about doing things right. Leadership is about doing the right things, right? Choosing certain things to do and choosing certain things not to do is leadership, which means it is essentially about critical decisions that you need to make. All of you make lots of decisions in work, right? But only some of them, the decisions that actually impact the business, are called strategic decisions, right? So now in this leadership context, while there are many, I would like to pick very few, maybe 3 of them, which I think are super critical for people to get into this leadership role, especially in formulating the strategy, whether it is corporate, whether it's business, whether it's product, whatever it is, right? And these 3 things, in my view, number 1 is influence by authority, without authority, sorry, right? Because many of your, if you're managers, you have certain authority. You know, I'm sure performance appraisals is one tool, one instrument that you have in hand to actually make people do what you want to do, right? But I'm sure you are also realizing that leadership at a next level means that you are working with people who don't report to you, right? The only way to be able to convince them is using your influencing skills, your persuasive skills, right? And that requires few other things. For example, every day, especially at a senior level, you will be negotiating with other leaders from other cross-functional teams. And in that context, there will be conflicts, right? There are certain priorities for the other leaders, other functions, but all of you need to come together and define and arrive at a common strategy. So you will get into lots of conflicts, and how do you manage those conflicts, right? Now, all of us are managing conflicts today. Let me give you a couple of examples, and I'm sure you will relate to these things, right? In fact, one of my conflict management resolution mechanism, right, for a long time, until I knew that there are actually 6 different ways of managing conflicts, and what method to use in what context is super critical. And I did not know about that. So for a long time, here is how my conflict management strategy used to be, right? Which is, and by the way, what is a conflict? In a simple ways, if 2 or more people disagree on something, there is a conflict, right? So it's a very simplistic way. Now, I used to basically look into this discussion or argument that is going on between 2 or more people, say differing on that particular thing. And the approach that I used to take is, guys, you decide. I'm okay with anything, right? I'm absolutely okay because, I can work with anything. You guys decide. And many of you do this today, right? And we think that we are being nice. We are not creating confusion, chaos, additional complexity, right? In fact, I'll tell you a real example that happened last week, where some of my, batchmates from college, right? I graduated from BITS Pilani, and they are planning Silver Jubilee reunion, right? And there are 2 dates, and there is a negotiation going on with 2 dates. And a lot of people you see is, I'm okay with any date. You guys choose, and we're there. Now, sometimes there is nothing wrong with it, but sometimes what happens is, you are actually missing out on voicing your opinion, bringing out your point of view, making your point, right? So now that is one conflict management strategy, right? Now, there's another one which you're all familiar with, and especially we employ this with our kids. My way or the highway. Doesn't matter, you got to do this, shut up and do it. Right? Now that's one strategy. You can employ it even in work, at workplace. The third one, very popular in India, is we employ this very frequently when we go for shopping, is that person says this item is 2,000 rupees, you start at 200 rupees, right? And then one of you will use this word, na tera na mera, right? Let's settle at the middle. So there are 6 conflict management techniques in business settings, and knowing when to use what is a great skill, right? So influencing without authority, negotiation and conflict management. And the third and the most important, to me, the most important skill, leadership skill, if you will, is your ability to tell a compelling story. Developing the kind of presence that you want to be seen as a leader. You may not be yet leader, but other people perceiving you as that is really important, right? Now, all of you can develop this. I used to think that, oh, you need to have a certain type of personality, certain way to dress, a certain way to, groom yourself and all of that. Sure, right? But there are more than those things. They are beyond that stuff. How do you modulate your voice? How do you give a strategic pause, just like I did now? Right? How do you emphasize and de-emphasize so that the audience is actually paying attention to you and do what you want them to do, right? At the end of the day, your job as a leader in an organization is to rally people, is to inspire people, is to motivate people to do. Yeah. Okay. Right. So that's the way I want to unbundle this strategic leadership part.